It's almost 6 o'clock, so I'll wait a few more minutes. Then I'm going to start talking and sharing my survival story. Part one of it, anyways. Make sure everything is okay. Just let everybody know this is new. Granted, I wrote my story, but sharing it live and speaking out loud about it, it's a little bit different. Okay, I'll wait a few more minutes and then I'm going to start. And what I'm going to do first is read a poem out of my book that I wrote, which is Because of Yesterday. And in this book, I actually tell my story of the abuse that I went through and experienced. So now I'm going to talk about it out loud, which is a little bit different since I wrote it because I'm a writer. So I prefer writing, not talking out loud. But in order to help others, I realize I need to talk out loud as well to share my story. So that is what I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to start off with a poem that I wrote in here. And the poem that I wrote, I actually wrote this when I was in 11th grade, I believe. It is called Why. I sit and wonder why people say life is worth living and love is worth trying. Happiness is worth being and sadness is worth leaving. Then I ask why. Why should I wake each day knowing I want to take it away? Knowing love will never happen, happiness will never be, and sadness is a big part of me. Now explain to me again why life is worth living. Because you cry from joy and I cry from pain. Because you bought a new car and me a new day. You took the wrong street and I can't find my way. Life is worth living when the pain fades away. So to write that at a young age, it kind of just starts off my story. Because when people think about abuse, that they've gone through, sometimes people abuse started at different ages. But for me, my abuse started at the age of 4 years old. And that was the first time that I was introduced to abuse. And for me, it was child sexual abuse that I experienced. So in my book, that's something that I talk about. And it's something I really haven't talked to the person that actually did the abuse to me. Because when I tried to talk to them, of course, they denied it. But then I had somebody else, as you might read in my book, that confirmed the abuse. But for me, my first memory was, as a child, was me laying on the floor in a living room with other people around and this person climbing on top of me. And that was the first time that I experienced my abuse. And at that age, at 4 years old, my innocence was robbed from me. And at a young age, as a girl, I realized that my body no longer belonged to me, that people were able to take from my body. So when people used to talk about their experience of losing their virginity, I never got to really have that story. I didn't even know what it felt like to have a virginity. Because as long as I could remember, sex was something that was already, I was exposed to at a young age. So for me to talk about it now, it's still kind of hard because just because I wrote about it and I speak out loud about it and I say that I'm healed from it, doesn't mean that it's still not allowed to hurt. It still hurts to think about it. It's still, I don't know, it still hurts, and it's still scary to talk about, because of when you start, for me, when people look at me and I start telling them my story, they don't think I've experienced that or gone through that. The reality is abuse doesn't discriminate. It doesn't pick and choose, just because you look like this, you're more exposed to abuse. Abuse can touch anybody. And as for me, my abuse started when I was 4 years old. So during this time, it continued until I was up until the beginning of fourth grade. So I knew what sex was. I didn't really understand what sex was fully, but I knew it was happening. And the raw part that I talk about in my book is I had a struggle within myself because a part of me started to enjoy it while another part of me hated it. So then I started to look at myself that something was wrong with me because I started to enjoy it, but not realizing that unfortunately, sexual stimulation is something you're going to enjoy. Our body is built to enjoy that. It's the part that when you don't agree to it, that's what makes it wrong. So it is wrong, no matter if it's taken from you, it's still wrong. I don't know how many people that's read my book has gone through some sort of abuse as far as sexual abuse, child abuse. But that's my first experience with abuse. And it goes up until I was in high school. There were times that I were around boys and I felt like the only way that they would like me if I was doing something for them sexually. So instead I closed up. I was that quiet person because I felt like if I was quiet and if I could hide in the corner, nobody would see me and nobody would touch me. But that wasn't always true because I had situations in school where I had boys grab on me, and touch me inappropriately, but I didn't speak up and say anything because I felt like my body didn't belong to me. So that was my first experience. And I talk about it in my book. And I wanted to actually I opened my book up to read it a little bit too. Just to give people an idea of how I set my book up. So, all right, why don't you tell me a little about your past and we can see if there are any connections with what you are currently going through. How much do you want to know? I want to know as much as you want to tell me, Miss Jones asked. Miss Jones is a therapist. And what I did was set my book up as going to a therapy session because I didn't know any other way to actually set it up to talk about everything that I've experienced. So therapy it was. And sometimes we don't realize that what we experience in the beginning of our life, the first memories that we have, kind of sets the tone for the rest of our lives until we're able to talk about it and deal with it and grow and heal from it. So that's the beginning of my story. My story continues on, of course, as I am in high school. As you could tell, I'm nervous. So talking out loud about this story making me nervous. And my mind is going blank right now. So just bear with me. So, as I spoke about high school, how it was for me and setting the tone, I did meet, I'm trying to take my time. I had met my first real boyfriend. And when I first met him, of course, I was scared and held back a lot. But that's the first time that I did allow, to have sex and was okay with it. So, my mind is going blank. Okay. Because talking about it is scary. And I will say that I'm proud of all those women that can talk about it out loud because it is hard. It's hard to talk about situations that you went through, you know, abuse that you've experienced out loud to other people because of the stigma that we have on society that if we talk about it out loud, the chances of people believing you are slim to none. And then people, want to talk down about you because we always think that we wouldn't put ourselves in that situation. If that was us, we would say something, but not realizing abuse doesn't just start out aggressively. Of course, if somebody was aggressively talking to it, came at us, we would speak out sometimes. But a lot of time abuse starts mentally. And then it's not even the abuser that mentally attacks you. You start to mentally attack yourself. I know for me, I did a lot of putting myself down. So I put myself in this cage and in this bubble so I couldn't feel anything that was happening. So my abuse started at the age of 4. I don't want to keep everybody too long, but I am going to continue to talk about my abuse and the abuse that happened in my marriage because that was my domestic violence abuse and how I got to that point. So I think that's all I'm going to share for now. And hopefully, y'all tune in again as I actually talk about the domestic violence part of the abuse. Okay. Thank you.